More now on the growing controversy surrounding the NSA spying programs. 1 week after German Chancellor Angela Merkel was angered to learn that the U.S. had been tapping her personal cell phone for years, her chief of intelligence was at the White House today demanding some answers.
It became clear that the image damage for the United States is so high that something has to be done on that.
ABC News has confirmed that U.S. intelligence has listened in on the phone conversations of the leaders of 35 American allies. And additionally, the Washington Post reporting today that documents obtained from Edward Snowden show that the NSA broke into Yahoo and Google data centers around the world. Now, for more on this, we're very pleased to be joined by Jim Arkedis. He's president of 4D PAC. It's a political organization that supports candidates with strong national security platforms. And before joining 4D, Jim was a counterterrorism analyst at the NCIS, specializing in terrorist networks in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Jim, thank you for a few minutes. I appreciate you joining us. Thank you for having me. You know, it's important to note the NSA takes some issue with both the Washington Post reporting and also some of the accounting in terms of the scope of our surveillance of some of our allies in Europe. That all said, it is interesting, I would argue, some of the mixed messages even coming from the White House, where the president says one thing, you got the press secretary saying something else, then you have Senator Feinstein saying something, and then you have a backtrack of that same evening from the administration as well. From your knowledge, it's interesting. Some say nothing new here, nothing to see. We've been doing this for a long, long time, and we're hardly alone. Other people saying, time out, I didn't know that we're doing it to this scope and this magnitude. You've been in this for a while. Of the reporting you've heard, has anything surprised you or not?
Not terribly. I mean, let's start from a very basic point of departure, and that's that the United States needs really, really, really strong intelligence collection platforms. That's one of the key components that keep us safe, right? The United States has been engaged in this for better part of 50 years at this point. The fact that we're spying, whether or not it's on our friends or adversaries, should not incredibly shock the American population. The nature of what the intelligence community does is by nature secret. So when all of a sudden revelations come out that we are, for example, collecting information on Angela Merkel's cell phone, does that sound great? No. Will it damage U.S.-German relations or U.S.-European relations? Sure. Did the White House know about it? Not necessarily, because a lot of what the intelligence community does, as I just said, is by nature secret. So there's a lot of mishmash going on, a lot of sort of cross wires. The intelligence community does not like to come out and talk about what it does. And so a lot of confused authorities and a lot of legal rambling and confusion is going to exist when there are public revelations about this nature of work.
In the latest story, the Washington Post, I'm sure you saw, which was, and I'm not trying to do too much micro detail here, but the PRISM program, as we all knew before this week, was, okay, the government wants to learn some stuff that Google, let's say, or Yahoo has. They got to go through the front door. They got to go directly to the internet companies and say, we want the following information, or they'll go through the FISA courts or whatever. This muscular program, something different, and I'm oversimplifying, but basically, they went through the back door. They didn't go and knock on the door of Google or Yahoo and say, hey guys, we want the following data on the following people. They're able to take it. Now, whether it's true or not, for this hypothetical conversation, because Washington Post is taking it as gospel, if in fact they're doing it, couldn't we have the same argument, which is, hey, we're talking about civil servants with the best interests in mind, but they're kind of making their own rules and their own interpretation of where the law starts and stops?
Right. This is really the fundamental issue that we get down to. Most of these rules that establish programs like PRISM were passed in the wake of the September 11th attacks, and that was 2001. And to you and me, that doesn't seem like a long time ago, and to most of the viewers out there, it doesn't seem like a long time ago. But think about all of the amazing advances we've had in data and communications just in the last 12 years. We have Facebook, we're exchanging pictures, messages, personalized communications in ways and in volumes that we never, ever, ever were before. So when you take laws that were written 12 years ago and apply them to data streams that are being continually updated and exploding exponentially in the volume of information that's available, then all of a sudden, you know, think about it. If you're an intel analyst working at the NSA, it's almost like you're a kid in the candy store, right? All of a sudden, all of this stuff is available to you, and it's only human nature to want to do your job as best as possible, hopefully, and collect as much information as you can. Now, under some of the legal authorities granted in the legislation, the government is perfectly within its rights to collect, for example, business record. That's a very broad term, right? But if you're an intelligence analyst or if you're a lawyer working for the intelligence community, you're going to look to use the broadest interpretation possible so you can collect the most information and do your job to keep the country safe. So what I've long advocated is the idea that these hearings are a good thing, that we're discussing these issues, we're holding our leaders to account, and we're saying, let's have a new conversation about data and security and privacy and civil liberties in the United States in 2013. Because we don't exactly know where that line should be drawn anymore because we've had this explosion of data in the last 5 or 6 years.
You know, Jim, you hit on a point that I think sometimes the public will take in pieces, but when you look at the microcosm, it's all about 9/11. I mean, in every way, shape, and form, people can't, I think, overemphasize how much, so much changed after that September morning. And every time we have a conversation, it could be on a local level, it could be on a state, it could be on a national level, of this privacy versus protection, the majority of the people shrugged their shoulders and said, screw it, I'll give up a little bit more privacy for protection. And whatever people interpretate, whether they're in the intelligence communities or elsewhere, they'll say, I'll push the envelope. The worst thing that somebody will say to me later is I went too far if I can argue that it was in the protection of national security. But I defy people to know where that line is. You're right, we should have the conversation. I think a lot of lawmakers don't want to have that conversation because they don't want to be responsible for drawing a bright red line they can't cross.
Yeah, no, that's certainly part of it. And if you look at the polling data, you mentioned a second ago this idea of people being willing to give up a little bit on the personal liberties side in favor of security. That was certainly the case in the wake of the 2001 attacks, no question about it. But what you'll see over the last 12 years is a slow but certain migration of public opinion back towards the idea that, wait a minute, maybe I want to guard my civil liberties a little bit more. Maybe I feel a little bit safer today than I did in 2001 or 2002. And all of a sudden, all of these things that are being revealed that the government is doing in order to protect our security, and all the incentive that lawmakers and civil servants have to protect the public, maybe don't quite line up with where the public is. And so that's why I'm advocating that we need this new conversation. I don't exactly know where that line should be drawn. I'm not a lawyer. I was a guy who worked in the intelligence community for a while. But at the end of the day, if we have this conversation and we realize where the various pressure points are, then as a country we can come together and say, you know what, we're safer now than we were in 2001. We did a good job. How do we keep safe going forward in the future without compromising our civil liberties?
It's amazing. All the years after 9/11, we still haven't had this national debate, long overdue. Hey, Jim, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's just pick up right there, which is post 9/11, all these debates we're having, they all have roots of what happened that morning, September 11th. And as much as people, if you bring it back to the core of all these debates about the rights of privacy, the overreach of government here, they all come down. Obviously, what's going on in Iraq, Afghanistan, the debates of Syria. They have a core in this. But everyone says, I think every rational person says, we still need a national debate about where are the limits here.
That debate
but can you
should
have that
happened then. But when you have a vice president of the United States, in this case more so than the president, saying challenges to our way of proposing this are unpatriotic and un-American, which is what he did, then you get this herd mentality,
Richard,
which everybody joined in the fray.
Politically, there was no way that debate could have been held at that time. All Americans wanted to know.
We had a presidential election in the middle of the Civil War. We had a presidential election in the middle of World War II, where people argued with each other about things. Don't underestimate the American people. We could have had it.
But
those
Richard,
those
fair
wars
enough.
were fought overseas.
Okay, but time out.
With the exception of the Civil War.
Well, that's 1 for 2.
Okay, but we did have an election in
over 100 years
2008,
ago.
and we had a new occupant. And I guess my question is, we still haven't had that debate. Can you have the debate in this country, or is it just too hard?
That train left the station a long time ago, and it's not coming back. We can talk amongst ourselves all we want. It's not going to change anything. It's going to, whether we want it or not, it's going to continue to be a wide net
I'll give you some hope.
of surveillance.
I'll give you some hope.
Give it to me.
If the crazy Tea Party stays true to this one part of its agenda, which makes some sense, which is that the limitations of government are also limitations in its power to spy, they may be able to form a coalition and you get the debate. It shouldn't be about drones, which is where the nut factor is going. It should be about these sorts of organized programs. Let's see if we can get the Tea Party to come and do something constructive.
Somebody ought to write about that. Richard Brodsky says the Tea Party gets something done. I appreciate that. Right?
You know, the funny part is the progressives and the Tea Parties on this one are on the same page, which is an overreach of government, and that we have protections in this country, most notably the Fourth Amendment, which said, now, the problem where we part company is, I happen to agree with you, but the Fourth Amendment is not viewed, at least in this administration, certainly the prior one, as black and white as you make it. They believe it's up for interpretation. In fact, the president, by all reports here, he had certain members of his administration reassessing how to redefine the Fourth Amendment.
Everything's up for dispute, and the courts will have to weigh in. But I don't think Dominic's point is essentially correct, which is we're not going to have a debate. This is arriving on the scene.
But hasn't technology lapped the philosophical debate, which
No,
is now
it hasn't.
the ability to acquire such huge amount of troves of data here that to say that I want my privacy is still attainable?
The extent to which the government should be able to inquire into, collect, and use data, personal, private data, of the citizens and anybody else is going to be a legitimate subject to debate in which left and right are going to converge.
But take the government out of it now for a minute, just to complicate it. Take the government out of it. Look at the debates that we've had here. You get in your car, whether it's the Easy Pass, whether it's now the car actually putting trackers in the car. How about your phone, right? That whether this is for commercial purposes or not, this is accessible by governments, by surveillance. My point is, unfortunately, I'm more in agreement with Dominic, even though I want you to be right, which is, I don't think you can slow this. I think technology is as big a part of this as the fear of the unknown.
Look, the moment you step outside your household, you're going to be subject to some type of surveillance, some type of tracking.
I'll let you finish. But do you understand?
Just the world we live in.
Is that just? I think Richard echoes the majority sentiment in this country, which is a resignation to it.
It's a description. It's not a prescription. And what we need to do is have the debate, and it will come. And it will come after people start sensing that their data is part of the problem. It's not just the German chancellor, it's what's going on in their lives. It's growing, it's going to come, it will happen, and things will get better.
Okay, so hold on. How about forget our people our age? 20 years younger than us, okay? They accept it. They don't even care. They share every element of their lives with everyone. They don't even have, forget about a concept of privacy. They don't have an interest in privacy.
That's one thing, sharing your information on Facebook, but it's another thing for the government to go to where you have an expectation of privacy, and that is actually into your email box. Now that's the problem. Like the latest article in the Washington Post we talked about during the interview about Yahoo and Google, about the NSA taking the metadata and information about people's emails without Google or Yahoo even knowing or giving permission. And that's the problem when the government is going where you have the expectation of privacy. And then the other issue is when the government is using the information against you to prosecute you without getting a warrant.
Richard,
that's the other problem.
Let me ask you a question, and I'll throw it to the table. When you send an email, do you really believe that it's private and that no one is looking at that?
No.
Because I don't either.
You know, wait a minute.
I do.
What we just glossed over is he just you-peopled an entire generation. And they're not, they're not stupid or unconcerned.
I didn't say they were either. I'm just
well,
saying
you
that they
certainly
grew up
came
with a
close.
premise. They grew up with a premise that everything's out there. Whatever I do, it's going to be out there.
There's
and they've even
Instagram.
found portals to try and bring in as many
Twitter,
people into their private
Instagram,
dealings.
Facebook.
That's not the way to phrase it. What they've decided is a lot of stuff that you and I believe historically we wouldn't want to share. They're a sharing generation.
And therefore, they don't have an expectation, as the four of us do, of what our privacy rights are and should be fought for.
That's a choice. That is not an inevitability. When you look back and say to them, do you want your medical data out there? Do you want your family life? They're just folks like everybody else. Don't you people a whole generation.
I will not you people a whole generation.
listen,
When we come back here, our next debate is closer to home, and this is over casinos and whether or not they're a good or a bad bet for New York. And the new polls show New Yorkers may be warming to the idea. And Mr. Brodsky here will tell you why a lot of this has to do with some of the politics slated for New York in 2014. Stay with us. We'll be right back.